Hello and welcome to Muay Ying, the podcast. Today's topic is We Don't Have All the Answers. Today we have Jess Izen on the show. Jess is an amateur Muay Thai fighter that I met at one of my seminars earlier this year. She's been training for about 4 years and has quite not a whole lot of fights, but enough fights to call herself a fighter.
Good.
Thanks for coming on to chat, Jess. How has your week in Muay Thai been?
Oh, it's been good. It's been good. I actually have been doing a strength training routine the last 4 weeks, just like kind of a grind in between fight camps. So I just finished. I get my rest week. So I'm looking forward to getting back to training Muay Thai because I've been so focused on the weights that I couldn't
Strength
do it.
stuff. I actually feel
Yeah.
like a lot of Muay Thai fighters don't do it enough strength stuff. I
Yep.
think they're too worried about putting on muscle weight or too
hmm
worried about it making them too tired for training.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's what I used to think too. But I have a coach that also fights. It's a certified personal trainer. So he's been doing some customized stuff with us. It's like focused around the movements we do. He's got some cool stuff. He has like this like rollerblade looking thing that fits on your foot and has a weight attached, so you can do like leg lifts, like all sorts of good stuff.
That
So
sounds like
yeah, I've been working
fun.
on my balance mostly. So hopefully it'll help.
Oh, that's awesome. So like I said before, I met you in Virginia Beach. I wasn't really sure which area you were from because I we did have a group that came all the way from West Virginia. We had some people coming from a little bit out of town too. And also, I asked Jose, who owns the gym, about like, oh, does Jess have social media or anything? I really like want to follow her journey. And he's like, no, but I think I could get her email. So I was like, okay, do that.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about yourself? Like, I don't know much about you either. I just know like that you do Muay Thai.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good starting point. Well, my name is Jess. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I've been training, like you said, for about 4 years. Casual. It's a hobby for me. I mean, I'm serious about it. I want to get better, but I'm not, trying to make a career out of it. I'm a software engineer by day. Just nice. It's pretty flexible, so it gives me a lot of room to train and so forth. Been on female hormones for about 10 years now, since I was 19. So kind of have the long-term view of that. And I know a few other folks that are trans that are trained Muay Thai. Nobody that's trying to fight, which is not surprising because it's a little tricky to navigate.
Mhm.
Uh, like dogs, like books, like bikes, like video games, just standard nerd stuff.
Well, I mean, I didn't know all of that before, but now I'm like, ooh, I wish we lived closer so we can like see dogs
Yeah.
together.
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah. I've seen your Instagram. You got some cute ones too.
Thanks. So you've been on female hormones for 10 years, and you started training 4 years ago. How did you get into like how did you even stumble onto Muay Thai, and what made you like just go, oh, I want to try that?
Well, so previous to Muay Thai, I did a lot of rock climbing and also soccer, like especially indoor soccer. But I was talking to someone on Tinder that trained Muay Thai, and they were like, "Hey, come check out my gym." And we're still buds, We were it's just a friendly introduction, but they brought me to their gym. It was really great. It was taught by this badass woman named Annie, so it was really approachable from the start. I kind of had this view of combat sports gyms for adults as being full of big, muscly dudes that are a lot of testosterone, and so it was a really welcoming environment and really tiny classes. So it was great for a beginner because you get the coach really walking you through things. So that was a wonderful start. But unfortunately, that gym closed. But I stuck with it. I I like team sports, but I like it kind of being on me and like my own head and not having to coordinate with other people as much besides my coaches. And I like the multidimensional elements. I like it's both your brain and your body. You got to use your brain before your body. You can't just grind. So it's been a really interesting sport, and I've learned more about the culture and the history, and it's a fascinating and textured past, and it's cool to see things grow. Especially what's going on right now at the stadiums in Thailand is really cool to see folks figuring out how to adjust for changing times.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. You hit some interesting points there too. I'm sure having a woman as the head coach, am I saying that? Is that correct?
yep.
I'm sure that changes the dynamic of a gym a lot because
Oh yeah.
most of the gyms I've been to, the head coach slash owner is always a man, which there's nothing wrong with. But there have been gyms where I stepped into and it was just again that very broy like culture, and it's very intimidating.
Yep.
and you just don't know like where you see yourself in it, and sometimes you just don't know like, oh, how are they going to receive me. So
Hmm.
it's so great that you had that great experience right from the get-go, because things could have went very, very bad. And
Oh
I've
yeah,
heard
I'm
some bad
really grateful for
experiences
it.
from people. Yeah. And
Yeah,
did
and he's
you
awesome.
oh, that's awesome. Did you go in training like just thinking like, oh, I just want to learn, or did you go in and be like, oh, that's badass, I want to fight?
I mean, I was kind of thinking about it. I feel like my first few weeks, I asked my coach, like, well, what do they do with trans people? Like, what the hell? Because it's like, I wasn't necessarily trying to fight, but if I'm getting interested in something, I want to know where it can go. And then also when I find out that there's not really any structure for something, it makes me want to push at it because I'm just, but no, I was just something cool to do. I always wanted to do martial arts as a kid, but I played like fiddle and soccer and never had the time. So kind of a late start. But you actually had some cool stuff to say
Hmm.
about that at your seminar, though, where you start late, but then maybe you have your passion growing instead of turning it into an obligation. So that stuck with me. Good insight. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad. 'Cause I always try to bring up that point because, like, especially being, I've been in, I was in Thailand for like 5.5 years, and when I go back, it would be like pretty much 6. So just seeing like these very, very high level Thai fighters, they're just so technically sound, and they could destroy any of us without even trying. But the thing is, like, for them, it's work,
mhm.
right? And they don't want anything to do with it on their days off. Whereas for us, it's very much a choice. It's a passion thing. So I do think that if you consciously choose something, no matter where you are in life, you do appreciate having it
Yeah,
more. You
absolutely.
know. So when did you end up starting to fight? Was it sometime last year or a couple years ago?
Let's see. I guess it would have been a year before the pandemic. I did some like PKBs, those are point tournaments that GAF puts on, like semi-contact intended for experience, like no knockouts, doesn't go on your record.
Hmm.
So I did one of those, I believe, in 2018, and that was actually my only fight against a woman, cis woman in this case, which was cool. Johnny
Hmm.
Davis, came in and he was like, "Yeah, if they're fine with it, I'm fine with it." Just especially because it's semi-contact, I think it's a safe approach. And it was cool. It wasn't the
Hmm.
best matchup. I had a lot of height and like I think more experience, so it was, it was a little one-sided, but it wasn't like nasty. Like we both were fine with it afterwards. Like there were, I'm sure that she would fight me again if we were, in the same event. But actually, the coach of that gym got pissed. This Apex Martial Arts, and he was talking a lot of trash about it being like messed up or whatever. And so since then, even at the point tournaments, I'm fighting guys for IKF and every event since then. But actually, that was a really interesting experience for me because people were coming up to me, like especially tall cis ladies that were like, "Yo, like there's another tall lady here. Like let's set something up." Like because there's a hunger for opponents, especially when you're in the taller weight classes. Cis women or trans women or whatever. So, that was what I've encountered with people my size who would fight. The issues I've had mostly have been with coaches and or not coaches, but like promoters and armchair people. I mean, it's tough. It's a hard thing to balance. I don't mean to be throwing them under the bus, but it was cool to meet fighters that wanted to fight me because I hadn't I up until then I'd just been sparring in the gym. And I go to a pretty family
Right.
gym. There weren't a lot of fighters at the time that we're growing our fight team. But yeah,
Yeah.
2018 stuff. I think to answer the
Okay.
question.
I'm gonna touch upon some of the points you said earlier, but just to backtrack a little bit, when you did express the fact that you were thinking about competing or you did want to compete, what did your coach say to you?
So this was Annie
I'm
Hilditch,
curious.
and she said, "Oh, I don't really know. I'll look into it. I don't think there's really much rules, basically." And but she said, if you get to that point, I'll support you in it. I mean, she didn't shy, and it was a very open ended question then because I was still learning how to throw switch kicks. Like I wasn't trying to fight anytime soon.
Right.
My second gym, Richmond BJJ, was Eric was the coach there, Eric and Jarrett, and Eric's attitude was similar. I didn't actually ask him about it that much because there wasn't as much of an emphasis on fighting at the time I was there, though they certainly fight. But his attitude was kind of just like go for it. But I really only have been fighting out of my current gym, Revolution BJJ, which is run by Jarrett Church. And there's some badass ladies that fight out of there too. It's part of why I train there. Is it's a really nice, like, diverse gym. But he he also is, I mean, his attitude's like, go for it. I'll support you, whatever you want to do. And he wanted to know, my preferences, which I appreciated. My preferences are I'd probably prefer to fight people more like me, whatever that means. But I want fights. Bottom line. He luckily had some connections in the sense that like he knows the promoters. Like Frank Crenshaw, the guy who runs the WK, is from Richmond, and then Johnny Davis. We've been to enough events that he has kind of back channels with them. So he at least could like text them or email them, and like that's how I found out it's okay for me to compete against like cis ladies in that first PKB, which was cool. That was a great start. Seemed promising, though unfortunately it got a little shakier. But yeah, that's kind of all my coaches have been like, well, we don't really know, but we'll help you out. And then Jared just happened to have the connections to really help. And then
Get your foot into the door,
yeah, and
right?
also like I've been in other communities that have this issue. Like it's not a problem unique to Muay Thai, so I've kind of learned how to, bug and try to get answers. Like I've been emailing these people, since the start. WK has kind of been giving me the runaround. They're always going to have a board meeting to discuss it, but they never are inviting community members, which is a little unfortunate.
Is that generally the answer you get when you ask about yourself as a trans woman and you're like, hey, what can I do to fight? Do they just say, oh, we'll get back to you and never get back to you?
That's generally the first response. And when I push on them, it's more like, well, the policy as it stands is this, which is usually like, fight cis men. And then I ask, but the policy isn't published anywhere, and there isn't like a clear discussion about it. It's all very like kind of wishy-washy, and it's been hard to get any like for me. Like, look, I can talk to people. Like, I can reach out. My coach can reach out. I'm lucky in that regard. But like, God knows how many other trans folks that are wondering, what do they even sign up for, and they don't have the wherewithal or the connections to reach out to Johnny Davis or whomever. And so there's not
and then come fight day, it's like, surprise.
Yeah, well, it's more like there's no posted policy, so people just don't. Like, that's the knee jerk when you're, especially because like people have their own like emotions and their own worries, and if you don't, if it feels hostile, you're just not going to go, right? And so it's kind of a self-reinforcing thing where there's not policies, and so people don't reach out, and then that kind of cycle. And again, not unique to Muay Thai. I mean, it's just something we got to get through by having visibility.
Got it. And in your experience as a trans woman, like what are the arguments or like the main obstacles to keep you from fighting, just entering and not having to ask so many questions? Like what do you think are the main obstacles to you just choosing who you think that you are more alike?
Well, the most obvious one is just having stated policies. That at least gives you a starting point. As far as like who's like frankly, I don't know who's like the perfect person for me to fight. I mean, my sense is that if there's tall ladies and there's no one else to fight, they would probably prefer to fight me than cis men. I don't know, but yeah, the biggest obstacles I think is just like a lack of interest in discussing it, and when the discussions are happening, I think they tend to be either behind closed doors, especially without trans folks, or even like cis lady fighters involved. For the most part, it seems like a lot of guys running promotions talking to each other, and then
it's like what do they know about
right,
inclusion?
or it's like the audience of social media, where it's a bunch of like douchebags trolling and just like shit talking whatever trans lady is like on the video screen or whatever. But it's it's I don't think there's a lot of like really obvious answers. Like, but the fact that there's so little discussion, that discussion is so closed off, is tough. I'm putting aside, there's as far as like the arguments you hear, like, I mean, there's always the people that are just like transphobic assholes that are just like, it's just men trying to beat up women, which like, sure, put those people aside. There's always going to be that. And then I think it really is just people having concerns about, safety, fairness. Those are two big ones. And then the counterpoint is inclusion. And to be honest, there's not a lot of good settled science. It's very small scale studies, very rarely related to athletes at this performance level we're at. Small cohorts, not very longitudinal. You see them for 1 to 2 years, like, well, maybe 3 to 4 years is a good idea for combat sports. Like, who knows? Like, we don't know. There's not like a lot of data. So it does put promotions in a bind because, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. There's always going to be someone mad at you if they don't like what they see. But
right, but at the same time, it's like there's not enough like well-known knowledge or just data in general, and you have all these like transphobic assholes running around,
right,
running their mouth around. So this is what they're basing it off.
Yes,
a lot of their policies off of. So And just like I also like when people talk about fairness and not including trans people in sport, like, and using fairness as like an argument, for me it's just like, but what do you mean by
Yeah,
fairness? Do you know what I mean?
fair.
Because like even like if you look at all like what we think are cis women within a division of any sport, it's just like some of these people had opportunities because they had more money. Some of these other people had opportunities because they had a certain type of body,
Yep.
or so on and so forth. So it's like if we're talking about
Yeah.
fairness, like what is fair and what
Yep.
is not fair, like and to also just pit women against each other,
Hmm.
it just takes away from like the inclusion aspect. It's like, all right, well, women in general also don't get paid as much as men, then why are you trying to you know undermine a already marginalized
Yep.
group? And for me, it's just certain things like that that just don't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Hmm.
And in terms of the safety, uh when you asked me like at the seminar, like, where do you see trans women in the sport, for me it was instinct for me to just say like, well, trans people, they belong in the sport. How, I don't know. And upon talking to you, it seemed like you had like a very similar thought process. It's like, yeah, I want to do it, but we don't know the best way to do it as of yet. And just also hearing that, and also hearing you say like, oh, cis women are worried about their safety, or people argue that cis women
Yeah.
should worry about their
Definitely.
safety. What about the safety of a trans woman such as you, who has been on hormones for 10 years? What about your safety? And when you brought up that point, I was like, she is so right. Like, that thought has never crossed my head, even though I was never arguing against trans people being in sports. But that thought just like never crossed my head, and I never see that also like being used as a point of discussion
Hmm.
in anything
Sure.
really. And you were like the first person I heard it from. And just like, yeah, having that very short conversation with you, like I said to you earlier, it just really got like, gave me a lot of food for thought. It just really made me wonder like, hmm, we don't have all the answers, but what can we do about it?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think what we're doing now is working. I mean, that's pretty apparent. Like, I don't
Which
think
is basically
anybody's
not
happy
a
with that
whole lot.
either. Like, really, it seems like promotions are just trying to avoid blowback, right? So they're not really publishing policies, and then, there aren't enough trans people, so it like goes by. But I can tell you in my fights, like, definitely everyone's hit a lot harder than me. Like, I've dropped a couple weight classes, and it's not a coincidence I'm doing weight training. So, like, you know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can show there's marginal advantages, like from a statistical perspective, because obviously from a practical perspective, there's always a Ronda Rousey's can beat all of our asses. But like, maybe I'm an outlier compared to the average cis lady. But like, I'm probably the force from like a cis guy to myself is scarier than the force from myself with a cis lady. Like if it's really about safety, but I think it's more about who we prioritize safety
Whenever
for.
people make generalizations, they always talk, but they're when people make generalizations, they usually mean like the average woman to the
Yeah, which
average
doesn't
man,
really make a lot of sense in
right?
fight sports. Like,
It doesn't.
like
It it doesn't. Like what is something that you have that a cis woman does not have?
yeah, I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's not like you have like this tremendous amount of strength that only cis men have.
No, I mean,
It's
you can make arguments around recovery time. You can make arguments around muscle mass, like density. Like, I have small
mhm.
tits. Like, that's like all these things. There's variance among, all genders, obviously. And also, like, the real impact in amateur sports, it's like, I mean, all I know is when I'm fighting, like, so far, almost all my fights, it's big dudes coming down, trying to take my head off, marching me down, bullying me around the ring. So I've been working hard on my footwork
Right.
and stuff because, I'm still going to fight them. But, like, the people that look more like me are in the other division, and those fights look a lot more fun. So I can say, but I want to fight people, and also realistically, like I'm fighting at 153 now. There might be a division for that in the cis women, division, but there's not a lot of folks fighting at my height, on the other side of the gender spectrum. So it's, you know, I want to be careful about making too strong a point because I want fights, and my sense is that cis women who are bigger are already getting shafted by availability, which you start to question, well, like maybe they should just be able to fight anybody if they don't have fights, but that gets into a whole other set of questions around safety or whatever.
Right. Right. Um what? do you think that people can do as of like right now to make things more accessible for you and other trans people in sports and combat sports? I mean, Muay Thai in America is still growing, so uh, I wouldn't say like I would say that people who are trans and are trying to be a Muay Thai fighter is especially like very niche topic
Yep.
and niche problem. But what is something that everyone across the board can do to kind of make things more accessible?
Well, first of all, if there's any trans folks out there interested in fighting, Angela can put you in touch with me. Feel free to reach out. Not that I have answers. I'm just a baby amateur, but community. But simplest thing for both promotions, just publish policies. Even if they're crappy policies, at least there's policies and people can ask you and challenge you about them. Because right now, by not publishing policy, it's just like no conversation. And then I would say from the community, like demand policies. Uh, you know, and especially like if you're a cis lady and you're not thrilled with the gender division stuff either, like, speak up. There's a lot of commonality, especially when it comes to like higher weight classes and just not having folks to fight. Like, I think, there's reasons for that that go beyond like, trans stuff. I think there's issues with how promotions are gearing their events. And so it benefits all of us to be, putting more of a lens on that. And definitely having discussion around it. I mean, just the sort of support work a community should do for people that are a little on the edge. Reach out. You see someone that seems like they don't know where they fit in, try to encourage them. If you see them at an event, be friendly. I've been really grateful. Honestly, every event I've gone to, I've been honestly getting swarmed by people a little bit after my fights. It's a little exhausting. That's part of why I don't have a public Instagram, is like we can't handle that. But like, people are happy to see us there, right? And that's good to see. And people need to know that that's what they can expect when they walk up. They're not going to expect, the shit that's on the internet, right? So yeah, I think conversation, welcoming, and then from a promotional perspective, just publishing policies and standing behind them and having listening sessions. If you're not sure about what to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. So would it help if I put together like kind of like a template email for people to kind of put out to like organizational bodies or people that organize tournaments, just kind of seem like one, demanding a policy, two, have something in the policy that clearly states things about inclusion? Would I be
Yeah,
right
that'd
to
be a
say
step
that?
in the good direction. I would also include maybe a demand of around engagement with community in different forms. Cis women, trans women,
Mm-hmm.
cis men, trans men. Like it's not just trans women.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm too new to the scene to do that. But that's where you got to start. Is you got to get respected folks to start, belly aching a little bit. And it's not promotions like
Right.
they're just busy, right? They got a lot of things to juggle. It's a typical problem, so it slips by. So yeah, I would help, to have folks like trying to start that dialogue. Absolutely. The only other thing I could say is, you know, a really really easy win is to like in the now, like stop making trans women fight in a division called the men's division. Like feels like shit.
Right.
Like
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
inaccurate. I mean, if the division is everybody but cis women, then probably the men's division isn't the right word. In the courier scene, what we do is we call things open and closed, where open is anybody can enter it, closed is restricted to different, marginalized groups that are
What scene
defined
is
in
this?
certain way. The bicycle courier scene. It's I used to be a bike
Oh, okay,
courier,
okay.
but yeah, it's just it's a different
Uh-huh.
competitive scene. It's similar. It's small community. They have events that draw in regional or worlds, and they have loose networks organizing them. It's not like pro boxing or something or Golden Gloves. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't fix things, right? It's just terminology at some level, but you know, at least like I mean, like you know, I would feel bad telling like some baby trans fighter to oh yeah come fight. Like I mean because they're gonna be put in the men's division and they're gonna feel like shit. Like not everybody, like I've been out for 10 years. Like I'm used to that. Like it doesn't cause me the same level of distress it might have like 8 or 9 years ago. But like I mean that's unconscionable
But
and it's
still,
a easy thing to change. It's just terminology. Like honestly,
right.
but
Mm-hmm.
that'd be a quickie. Discussion, policies,
Yeah,
engagement, but then also like fix your language would be where I would start.
got it. And you bring up a good point with that. That was also something that we touched upon like, how do you see things being kind of changed to be more accepting of everyone is you suggested, oh, they should just have like an open division
Yep.
where anyone can join. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Are there any other fixes that you can see being like either like short term or in the long run kind of solutions that you see it being possible to achieve?
Well, I mean, I think for like semi-contact events, like if you look at Thailand, like men fight women in bars all the time. They're casual fights. They're not trying to take each other's heads off. And I think having a recognizing a distinction between what types of events there are and like whether they all need to have the exact same rule set around divisions. Like PKB is like, I mean, the women, there's like 4 adult women there. They like it's usually they're fighting somebody 20 pounds heavier than them. It's like stupid. Like there's no need for that like gender separation. So those ones are easy. As far as like what to do at full contact events where people are cutting weight and training and are going for knockouts, I don't think there's easy answers. I think just splitting it by gender is just a shorthand that doesn't really like. I mean, you still have bad matchups. Like it's not just about gender. I mean, from a promotional perspective, like the nicest answer is just do really careful, like considerate matchups, like and just make sure that both fighters are happy with them and go for it. Which for a fight night sort of promotion that works, but for a big tournament where you have 100 people registering, I recognize it's not practical. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but if I were a promoter and I could get the gaming board on board to let me do whatever, I would probably just put division making on hold and wait till people get there and just like get consent of participants. If that's practical from a logistical perspective, I think at that point the only person that is going to be pissed are just like armchair people. But if the fighters are happy, especially like again like higher weight classes, like from what I've seen, it's pretty sparse. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of objections. If I show up and I can fight, someone else that's around my height, around my size, like I think they would probably prefer that than fighting a cis guy or nobody, right? So
Right.
I don't know, but I think really there's not a lot of shortcuts. Like there's got to be in the absence of really clear, like unbiased, like largely sampled longitudinal science. It's just got to be community engagement and discussion and come to some agreements around our priorities, right? Because we all want to balance these things like safety, fairness, like inclusion. There's not clear answers to any of them. It's just going to be a set of value judgments around what we think are most important. So I think that's just something we have to discuss. And I think it needs to be the people, participating in the events who really are driving that. Promoters should have legitimate concerns around legality, around logistics and promoting. Like I understand like there's going to be some constraints, but when it comes to like stuff that isn't just like a infrastructure, like event organizing concern, like I think it really should be the fighters that drive that because we're the ones putting our bodies out there, right?
And in the case of the tournaments, we're the ones paying
Yeah,
for it.
that too. Yep, sure.
Well, I mean, all amateur fighters, we're the ones
Yeah,
paying for
yeah,
it. And honestly, people, they wouldn't have a show, they wouldn't have a tournament without amateur fighters.
yep.
So, uh, at what point would you say, like, like, how do I word this? What would be like the monumental moment in your fight career where you're like, ah, yes, finally?
Oh, I mean, for me, it'd just be when I can like fully implement, my game plan and like feel good about, how I do in the ring, be able to use some more higher level combos, get better at like reacting to things as people are throwing them and not just like, throwing single strike. I mean, for me, it'd be just like personally being happy about my development. But
Right.
I'd be happy to see inclusive policies and be able to fight in a division that reflects my gender identity. That'd be great too. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at this point, like frankly, like I'd be thrilled if by the time I'm done fighting, there's really good rules. But I'm kind of resigned myself to like fight against cis dudes, like mostly for while I'm fighting. I don't know how long I'm going to be doing it 5 years, 10 years. Like hopefully we'll get somewhere by then. But like, my motivation and my like successes are kind of based on like my internal progression at this point. I don't think it's a really a safe environment to look to for external like validation right now. Cause again, I'm fighting guys. Like
I
it's
agree.
all like whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, of course, like everything that you do, it has to come from you.
Mhm.
You know, like whatever people say to you, it's like, oh, it's just like the cherry on top of the cake, but it's not
Yeah.
necessary. You know.
Very nice. Be
Uh,
nice.
yeah. Do you think in a way though, like just you making yourself visible, out there in the fight scene. Um, do you think that's helping people start conversations and trying to change these policies that, or develop policies in general, or just, get people thinking about, okay, where do we include trans people in Muay Thai?
Yeah, I mean, there's so little visibility. Any visibility is better. And my experience at like in person is that usually there are a lot of people that come up to me, and some of whom have questions about how to support their fighters. So that's great to see. And I mean, look at MMA. We have the second trans lady fighting Alana McLaughlin, and like it's a huge hubbub. Like it doesn't take a lot to get conversation going. So
Right.
I feel very new in the scene. Like I'm still kind of finding my bearing, but that is how it's got to go. Is you got to show up and you got to talk to folks, and hopefully get more trans folks feeling able to come, because that's really where the wheels start turning.
Right. And I know that you keep saying like you're very, very new to the scene, but I feel like part of the reason why I wanted you on the podcast was also just to get your experiences as they're fresh, as
Yeah.
you're going through them, as you're learning about everything within the Muay Thai fight scene and where you can go. So I mean, if I spoke to you 10 years down the line, you were still fighting, I mean, who knows if you'd be able to share the things with the same amount of energy that you're sharing them like now. Maybe 10 years down the line you'd be like, ah, fuck this.
Yeah. Well,
Who knows?
hopefully I'll feel more positive in 10 years, but yeah, I see your point for sure. I mean, I got a little bit of
Yeah.
hope. So let's say.
I have a lot of hope. I feel like generally, people's attitudes about inclusion are moving in a very good direction.
Yep.
So I do have a lot of hope.
I mean, like
I
when I
know
go
that
there,
you.
like the staff are happy to see me. Like the doctors are like kind of confused. I'm in the men's division, but they're supportive. I've had judges like come up to me afterwards. It's like definitely like in terms of the actual people in the scene, it's been pretty positive. And that's why we need discussion, right? Is if we all have these opinions, why is it still so like crappy?
Right, right. I get it. I know that you said that Muay Thai for you is a
Hmm.
hobby. Are there any goals that you want to achieve other than just getting better?
It's a good question. I mean, I'd like more fights, and I'd like to feel like I'm proud of how I did in my fights. I'd like to, fight with elbows, which I think I got to do later this week. Here, looks like my coach is going to sign off. I'd like to see, more peers, like, my partner trains, like, other trans folks. It'd be great to, feel like I have a more of a community around me. And I mean, like
Hmm.
around me as in like enrichment, right? Because there's community everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I love to see policies. I'm kind of a political minded. So when I see something like this, I want to push on it. So that'd be pretty satisfying, I think. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, I don't know. I just mostly just want to get better though.
Yeah, yeah. Of course. I mean, why do we fight?
Hmm.
What can coaches do for their athletes who are in a similar position as you are? Like you said that you had some people going up to you and asking you for advice. What are some things that you told them, or what are some things that you would add to that or change?
Yeah, it wasn't so much asking me for advice on the spot because I was like probably concussed and they were just exchanging contact information. But like I dropped by a gym in New York, Diamond Heart Muay Thai, because they're a lot of it's they just want to expose their fighters to people that are more like them. So I would say that's a great impulse, right? If you have somebody that doesn't see people like them, even if they're a cis lady, and you just have a gym full of big dudes, like arranging contact and like training opportunities and sharing experiences with people that you can relate to, I think is always valuable, whatever the group of people you're talking about. I think on a political level, coaches, especially if they care about supporting their fighters, should be pushing promotions on policies. So yeah, if there's some sort of letter going along, please sign up. And then also, if you have a fighter that wants to fight and is ready to deal with the situation as it stands. I mean, I think what my coach shared is a great example. Just use the connections you have, or reach out. Try to raise enough of a fuss to get an answer, and so your fighter knows what to do, and then show up and support them, and give them good advice if they're going to fight someone that might be stronger than them. Help them prepare for that, right? Like, just like
Yeah.
you would for any fighter, but it becomes especially important because of potential differences.
Hmm. What are some things that you would tell trans people in the Muay Thai community who are just starting out or thinking about competing? Or what would you even tell your former self? Like any pieces of advice you would give them, or just heads up about anything?
I mean, go for it. People are really nice when you get there. Probably cut a little more weight than you're thinking if you're fighting guys. But I mean, like, I did okay. I almost won my division in WKs. Like, you're not totally outgunned, especially in amateurs. It's such a crapshoot anyway. Like, who you're going to be against, like how experienced they are, how strong they are. So don't psych yourself out. Just focus on your skills, your game plan, and just go in, with your eyes open, and be ready to be a little offended by some things. But people are generally going to be nice to you. And we got to
Mm-hmm.
show up. If you want other people like you to show up, there's no way around that. So,
Thank you for sharing all of that. I hope this also inspires some people the same way that that conversation with you that I had so many months ago like stuck in my head and just really wanted me to get another conversation going. So hopefully it gets other people who are listening in to just do similar things and just also question the things that they think are normal, and let's all see some progress in sport and be more inclusive.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me. Glad to get some wheels
Well, of
turning.
course. Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add that you think people should know, or any words of wisdom to part people with, or anything you want?
Not so deep as that, but just something really interesting, food for thought. Sylvie Van Douglas in Thailand has a fighter at the gym named Angie. It's a trans lady that fights cis men, and she's on hormones. She was actually the first woman to fight at Lumpini. So it's a really interesting story, and she just started fighting again. So if you want to hear a completely different interview from a different perspective, go check her out too. Because in the States we have our own situation, but it's a very different situation in Thailand too, and it's raises a lot of questions about like gender and misogyny and all the stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. How can people get in contact with you, follow your journey? I know you're not really public on social media, so if you don't want to drop your handle, don't feel pressured to. But is there any way? Is there anything you want to plug or shout out or?
uh, yeah, I mean, I'm just a private Instagram, just photos of my dog. So not my Muay Thai face. I would say if you're trying to get in touch with me, talk to Angela. If folks are trying to like start organizing and want to have a more open community, we can make a mailing group or Reddit subreddit or something like, and then I'd be happy to participate. But yeah, I mostly am interested in talking to trans folks, and if people are trying to draft a letter, I'll help. But I'm just some random fighter. Like we all need to talk to each other. It's not just just me.
We all need the support where we can get it.
Yep.
It's not an easy journey.
No.
um, just let me find my spiel. Um, okay, so Muay Ying is the first platform to focus those on Muay Thai that don't get the attention that they rightfully deserve. We also have articles on preparing for your trip to Thailand, fights, historical moments that have happened in the past year, and much more on muay-ying.com. We also have a Patreon account if you'd like to support us financially so we can keep producing quality content for you. And that's on patreon.com/Muay Ying. Muay Ying is one word. You can follow me, Angela Chang, via Instagram, Angela Sitan, Sitan. If you can review, subscribe, and share this episode, we'd greatly appreciate it. It will help this podcast grow. Thank you, Jess, for coming on. I had so much fun talking with you, and I wish you all the best in you have 3 upcoming fights, right?
Yeah, January, February, March. Yep, first one's in Columbus, Georgia. So
Busy.
yeah, I mean, if I'm doing the camp, I might as well just keep it rolling, right? I don't want to have to, it's easier to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Okay, well, thanks for coming on, Jess.